The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for episode 45 of The Murder in My Family. If you find that you enjoy this podcast, please take a minute to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast so that the show can continue to grow and reach new listeners. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderInMyFam or by searching for the Murder in My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support this show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated. And you can do so by visiting patreon.com/themurdermyfamily. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon include early access to ad-free episodes of the show, plus bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include thank you cards, stickers, and more. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/themurdermyfamily. In each episode, I'll give shoutouts to any new supporters. And thank you to all of the supporters that generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. Before we get started with this episode, I'd like to remind you about a big event coming up this fall that I'm really excited about. It's called the American Crime Festival, or American Crime Fest, and it's taking place right here in South Jersey where I'm from. The American Crime Festival will be held in Wildwood, New Jersey, this November 8th through 10th. American Crime Fest will include lots of presentations and compelling panels from the world of true crime. I'll be both participating in a panel discussion and moderating one, so be sure to come out and meet and hang out with podcasters like myself and some of the people you know best from the world of true crime. Please visit AmericanCrimeFest.com for more information. And if you're going, I have a promo code to save you 10% on your ticket purchase. At checkout, use my promo code, MORPH, that's MORF, all in caps, and you'll get 10% off. I hope to see you there. Thank you, and now on with the show. Maddie Finch would have turned 21 years old the week this episode is being released, but Maddie never got the chance to celebrate her milestone birthday. Never got a chance to go to a casino to try her luck on a slot machine, or to go into a bar to have a drink with friends. She never got that chance, because on New Year's Day 2018, Maddie's life suddenly came to a violent and tragic end. In late 2017, 19-year-old Maddie Finch was a nursing student at Illinois State University. She was looking forward to some time off with her family, which included her mom, Carrie, father, Jason, and her sister Josie, as well as other extended family. They were getting ready to celebrate the holidays in their La Harpe, Illinois home, located about 100 miles northwest of Springfield, a home that they moved to because the Finches felt that the neighborhood was safe. After graduating from high school, Maddie's first semester of college was in the rearview mirror. But the road ahead wasn't going to be quick or easy, and Maddie determined that she wanted to get through college to become a nurse that specialized in working with children who were sick with cancer. Those that knew Maddie best described her as being warm, friendly, and artistic. To unwind, she enjoyed watching episodes of Grey's Anatomy or spending time with her dog Flynn, who Maddie had rescued from an animal shelter. She also spent time around her house and with her sister, although as with many siblings, Maddie and Josie were different in many ways and didn't always see eye to eye. With that being said, they had a sisterly bond that couldn't be broken. As New Year's Eve approached, Maddie's parents made plans to go out overnight and celebrate. Josie had plans too, which left Maddie to celebrate the New Year by herself. But Maddie arranged for some friends to come over and hang out and welcome in the New Year with a small party. Maddie's parents knew that she would have friends over, but after previously getting in trouble for a party that they didn't know about, they knew Maddie wanted to make a good impression on them and that she would be responsible with this party, so they weren't very worried. On December 31st, 2017, New Year's Eve, several of Maddie's friends showed up at her house to hang out. But as we know in some cases of young adults and teenagers hanging out, word gets out that there's quote-unquote a party at so-and-so's house. This happened to Maddie, and before long more people showed up at the Finch home. Many of the attendees splintered into groups, and arguments broke out between the groups. Things seemed to settle down, but then flare back up, eventually ending up in the Finch's garage. Maddie was front and center trying to calm everyone down and to stop things from getting out of hand. But it was too late. Things were out of hand. Someone pulled a .22 caliber handgun during the argument. It went off, and Maddie was struck in the back of the head. The groups of people at the Finch home scrambled, startled by the gunshot. Many of them ran off and out of the house. At around the same time, Maddie's parents were already asleep in their hotel room. Jason had a dream and thrashed around as he slept, striking his wife in the face. When Carrie woke up asking what was going on, Jason, still half asleep, said that someone was trying to hurt you and Maddie. Carrie dismissed the dream and went back to sleep. Sometime later, after midnight on the 1st, Jason's cell phone rang, waking Carrie up once again. And as we all know, calls late at night or very early in the morning hours rarely end well. On the other end of the line was the Finch's neighbor, telling them that they needed to get home. At the same time, Carrie's phone rang. It was one of Maddie's friends on the other end. She was sobbing and barely audible. The only thing Carrie could make out was that Maddie was hurt, possibly stabbed. The Finches raced to pack their stuff up and get out to their car to make the 25-mile trip home. During their frantic race home, the Finches were pulled over for speeding. When they told the officer what happened, he agreed to escort them all the way to their house. EMTs phoned Carrie during the ride, and she asked where they were taking her daughter to. They didn't answer, and Carrie at the time couldn't understand why they were not rushing to get Maddie to a hospital. Once Jason and Carrie Finch arrived home, the scene that awaited them was horrible. Police cars and ambulances were parked in front of their house. Jason and Carrie jumped from their car and ran towards the garage. When they got to it and looked in, police tried to stop them, but not before they saw what is every parent's worst nightmare. Their child was dead. 19-year-old Maddie was lying on the floor, her foot protruding from a quilt that was covering her. It was at this point that the Finches learned that Maddie had been shot and killed. Investigators and first responders trampled through their property. Curious neighbors, friends, and family showed up. As the family tried to make sense of what had happened and comfort each other, police began their investigation in an effort to identify and apprehend Maddie's killer. Luckily for investigators, there were plenty of eyewitnesses who agreed to talk, although some of their accounts varied. All of them agreed that a gun was pulled, and that Maddie was shot in the head. Some thought she may have been standing when she was shot, but some said that Maddie was lying on the floor near the shooter, who was also lying down when the gun went off. Despite the differing accounts of what happened, all the eyewitnesses were in agreement about who pulled the trigger, a 17-year-old named Antonio L. Sanchez. It didn't take police long to track him down and arrest him. Was there a motive for the shooting, or was it an accident? It would be up to the legal system to determine and to hand out the appropriate punishment. On January 4th, 2018, 3 days after she was killed, a memorial for Maddie was held at the La Harpe Christian Church. Maddie was laid to rest in the La Harpe Cemetery. The Finch family was left to deal with their pain and grief and a slew of unanswered questions as they waited for the wheels of justice to turn. In September of 2018, Antonio Sanchez, who had now turned 18, accepted a plea deal in which he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for killing Maddie. Although that hardly seems like enough time, Maddie's parents didn't want to see all of Maddie's friends and witnesses to her death have to get on the stand and relive what they saw. There's no happy ending here. Was justice done? Whether it was or not, no justice of any kind will bring Maddie back to her family, or fill the void that they have in their hearts. Josie Finch doesn't have her sister to butt heads with and then make up with. Maddie's dog Flynn doesn't know where she went and why she's no longer there to pet him. The children one day that are sick in the hospital with cancer fighting for their lives will never have Maddie at their sides to help them with their battle. And that's the sad reality here, is that when one person is murdered, there's a ripple effect, touching others in ways you don't really think of. And Maddie's story should be a lesson that one bad decision, one pull of a trigger, can change your life, and the lives of many others. Maddie's mom, Carrie, joined me to discuss Maddie's case, and how her death has permanently affected the Finch family. That conversation is coming up in just a moment. Hi, Carrie, and thank you for sitting down to share Maddie's story with listeners.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Well, I wanted to start off by seeing if you would share some of your favorite memories of Maddie with us and maybe tell us a little bit about what kind of person she was.
Okay. That's pretty easy to do. She had a pretty big personality. Well, just a little thing about Maddie. When she was a senior in high school, she graduated in the summer of 17. They voted her class, which is not very big, about 100 and some kids. But her class voted her life of the party. She just had a smile that, people would talk about her. They asked some friends to talk about her on a video after she was killed, and a lot of them said you just knew it was Maddie when she walked in a room. She just had kind of a presence about her, and she was really just down for the fun. She loved to be with her friends. She was gorgeous and smart and kind and caring. She had a huge heart. She had all these friends from all over the place. She really felt connected to people. She was definitely a person that you could talk to and that her friends felt like they could go to. I think she took on a lot of people's problems. And I think she felt safe here at home. So Maddie wasn't really an easy child. She always she liked to get her way, and she was pretty headstrong and stubborn. And the family dynamics, really kind of worked against her a little bit, I guess, because my husband and I are both teachers. And she felt compelled to, behave at school, I think, and keep herself together and respect teachers and her elders and things like that. But her actual personality was one that she didn't give respect really until you earned it. So she did have some problems with some teachers once she got into high school, but she was just one of those kids that was down for the fun, and she liked to nap all day and eat when she wanted to, and then just be with her friends all night. And I just can't think of one particular story. I know one thing that I really, really miss is sitting in the recliner upstairs in our house, and we have a split level, so the recliner sits kind of by the stairs, and she would come in the door on the weekend in the afternoon, and her hair would just be a mess, and she'd have her clothes in her hand and some different clothes on, and she'd look at me and say, "Mom, you're not going to believe what happened." And I miss that so much about her. And I miss her witty remarks. She always had some witty comeback, and if you said something back to her, especially me and Jason, my husband, she would if you said something she didn't like or she thought was funny but didn't want to laugh, she would pinch you under the arm, and it would hurt so bad that she would think that was hysterical. And I think at her funeral, I had looked down at my arm, and I still had a mark where she had pinched me.
Oh.
So I don't know. Those are just some of the things. I feel like I'm rambling now. So there's so many stories about her and her escapades at night and running through cornfields and just being with her friends, I guess.
Well, it sounds like she had a little bit of an adventurous side, but at the same time was a very sweet person too.
She was. She had a quality about her. She was always for the underdog. You know, she'd come home so many times from school and say, you know, there's this girl, and people make fun of her, or people aren't very nice to her mom, and I asked her to go out with us, or, she said, I let her, use my locker, or I talked to this girl in the bathroom, and, it would be these random people names I'd never heard of. And, she'd say, I'm the door, Mom. I'm going to so-and-so's house. And Jason would be like, well, stop, Maddie. Who is this? So, and try to question her. But she was just so headstrong and so into her life. And she was just really into life itself, I guess. But that also came with her share of struggles, and she wasn't a perfect person by any means, just like the rest of us. And she had her struggles with body image and weight and am I good enough, and she just really wanted someone. It didn't matter to her really who. She just wanted someone to care about her and love her for who she was. And I think that's the biggest thing about her. She stood strong for women, and she felt like, she was a bit of a feminist, yet she loved the makeup and the hair and the jewelry and the outfits and her signature smell. You could tell when she walked in the room that it was her, not only because of her laugh and her smile, but because of the smell of Victoria's Secret Bombshell. Meaning the girl drenched herself in it. So occasionally I can smell Bombshell by me. At first it was comforting, and now I miss it. I miss her when I smell it.
And I can only imagine that those little reminders of her maybe are a good thing, but at the same time cause you a lot of sadness.
Yeah. And, for a parent to lose their children, it's just so, I don't know how to explain it. The feelings are so, I want to say day by day, but it's more like minute by minute, because, you could see something one day, like the smell, or one of her friends drew an amazing portrait of her that I'm looking at actually right now, and sometimes I can look at it and it's like looking in her face. Her friend drew her eyes so that it's like looking in her eyes, and sometimes when I look at it, I just get this feeling of just love and happiness and peace, and I just love looking at it. And then other times I catch a glimpse of it, and it's just an instant of just sadness and heartache and grief. And it's random, we planted 100 daisies in our yard. White daisies were her favorite, in a local greenhouse, and a friend of hers donated the daisies to us. And now seeing a daisy, it's sometimes I'm just so happy to see it, and sometimes it just, like I said, it's just an instant heartache and sadness. So really, those moments are all the time, but as a parent who lost a child, you have to stop yourself sometimes from going, I guess, down the rabbit hole, because if you go too far and think too much, then it is the sadness. If you can just slide over it, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Then it's more, you can hold on to the happy thoughts and the happy memories. It's those times when you're alone, or, in the house when I'm alone, sometimes they catch me, and then I get so far down and thinking about all the she'll nevers and will never and all the nevers, I guess, can really weigh you down and get you to the sad place. So, yeah, the little reminders, it just depends on your mood and your time of day and what's happening around you.
And I read that your family actually moved to La Harpe because it seemed like a safer place compared to where you had lived before. Did you ever think that what happened to Maddie could happen in a place like that?
No, never in a million years. And I want to clarify that too a little, because I grew up in Woodstock, and which is northwest of Chicago, and we weren't a suburb when I grew up. It was a safe place to live and beautiful and amazing and idyllic, and it was just bigger and it was closer to Chicago. And I think when I moved down here, every place is Chicago. When you talk to somebody and I say I was from Woodstock, they always look at me with a blank expression. So you say Chicago and they say, oh yeah, okay. And to me, at 20 years old, this was safer. And to my husband, who, had never lived anywhere but here, this was safer. And it seemed like a safer place because we're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and the population of the town is about 1,200. And, in Woodstock, I graduated with 300 and some people in my class, I think. So I guess, not necessarily, like, I didn't grow up amongst, gang violence or anything. It's just when Jason and I talked about staying around here, this was the safer choice. And that's one of the reasons why we chose to stay around here. We could have, had a different life if we moved. I have 4 sisters, and my parents are together, and they're very together. They do things together, and we could have been a part of that, but we chose to be down here because we thought that this was a safer option, yes. And never in a million years did we dream that something like this could happen. And I think that's also, not only do I have to come to grips with the fact that I've lost my daughter, but I think that Jason and I have to face the fact that this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen around here. I think she's the only person to have been murdered in La Harpe since like the 1800s. I mean, I didn't look in that, but I haven't talked to anybody that knows somebody who has ever been murdered in La Harpe. So no, we never dreamed that this would happen. Maddie's friends were friends who liked to party and have a good time, but they were never hateful, gun-toting friends. I mean, yes, they had guns, but they'd all been through gun safety classes, and they were rifles, and they're shooting, deer and raccoons, and so no, we never dreamed this would happen. And I don't think anybody around here ever dreamed that this would happen, and which is why it was it was a shock just because we lost our daughter, but then it was a shock because, nobody expected something like that.
Yeah, I think it's proof that bad things, unfortunately, can happen anywhere, no matter how safe somebody feels.
Right. Exactly. We just never dreamed, with the odds of being down here, and never, once did I send her out the door and think, that was the last time I was going to see her. And she'd been to, many different places on the weekends, and people had been here, and yeah, this isn't something you could ever think that would happen to you.
So we talked a little bit about this area being relatively safe. There hadn't been any murders there. Had she ever had any problems with anybody that would ever give you reason to pause or think that there could be something violent in her future?
Oh gosh, there was a time in junior high where, a boy said he wanted to hurt her, just because she wasn't, I don't know, just a little squabble between her and another boy. And it really wasn't that. It was more he wanted her attention, and she just didn't give it to him or give him enough. And at that time, we were talking about how we were nervous about him going to high school with her, but it was never, he didn't carry a gun. He didn't I knew his family, and I guess we talked about being nervous about that, but it was that Maddie could share her house with him because she was a pretty tough girl and pretty strong. And I mean, it wasn't the kind of worry where we thought that she would be shot. No. Violence in her, there were people, her friends that were boys, they would fight occasionally, and, but it was a fist fight. They'd take it outside and fight and then be done with it, and then the next thing you knew, they were driving around in their truck together. So, no, there wasn't anything. She went to ISU, Illinois State, for a semester, and she texted me and called me sometimes scared because of she did hear gunshots, or she saw guns, and she saw some pretty heavy drugs and alcohol at some of the parties, and that set her back. And the reason that she was moving back home in December was because she was too nervous there. The people, there were too many people. She liked her small town home. And so, no, we never expected, there was never anything. There was never a time when she came home for a party and I thought, gosh, she might be in danger of getting shot.
If you can you take us back to when you found out that Maddie had been shot? As a parent myself, I can't even conceive how you process that and then deal with the aftermath.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I go back to this night so many times in my head and think that I should have done something different, but hindsight is 20/20, and I think it's pretty safe to say that everyone knows that if Jason and I could stop, I try to go back and think about something that we could have done differently, and I think everybody knows that if Jason and I could have done anything to stop this, of course we would have done everything, including given our own lives to stop it. But let's see, Maddie had moved back home. We were happy to have her home. When she left, I didn't think she was ready to go, and so it was pretty relaxed, actually having her back and all of her stuff in her room. And so she kept saying she was going to have a New Year's Eve party, and Jason and I would kind of laugh. And she'd had one the year before and gotten in big trouble, and she was grounded for a while from her car and friends and phone and stuff. The last New Year's Eve. So this New Year's Eve, she was kind of bound and determined to show us that she could have her friends here, and she could be a little grown up and make some better decisions. So reluctantly, her dad and I agreed to it, and we had some plans, and they kind of fell through. And as of that morning, we were still not, I was still not convinced. I kept saying, no, we're just going to stay here. And she'd say, well, you can stay downstairs in your room then, because my close friends are going to be here, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to, start the new year the right way. And she had this outfit planned. And so, and Josie was home back too, but she was staying at a friend's house. So Jason and I went to a hotel room and out for supper and champagne and everything at a place in Burlington, which is about between 25 and 30 minutes away. And we left that day because we were doing some shopping. So when we left her, she was happy and getting ready that day with her friends. And we were out for supper, and we'd called her, Jason had called her and talked to her and asked her who was there and what was going on. And she was laughing and having fun, and it was just she had a lot of guy friends, so it was a lot of guy friends and some of her girlfriends, and we said goodbye. We were about 8:23, 8:30, I guess we were eating supper. And then I texted her a couple of times, asked her how it was going, and she was fine. And we went to a hotel, my husband and I, and we fell asleep. I think we were asleep about 10 o'clock. And the next thing is something really strange, I guess, that we haven't told a lot of people, but about 10:30, Jason had hit me in the night. Like, he was sleeping sound asleep, and so was I. He hit me on the side, like, of my face, and I yelled, and I said, "You just hit me," and he said, "What?" And I said, "You just hit me," and he said, "Somebody was trying to hurt you," and I said, "Well, you hit me," and he said, "No, I hit the guy that was trying to hurt you and Maddie." And I said, "Jason, you're dreaming," and he'd gone back to sleep, and I got up and went to the bathroom and came back and laid down. And I fell back asleep, and we woke up to his phone ringing, and it was our neighbor. And he said, "Jason, you need to come home. Something bad's happened." And it's Maddie. And at that time, my phone rang, and it said Hannah. And Maddie has two best friends, the two Hannahs, and it was one of the Hannahs I don't remember, and she was yelling and crying, and she was saying, "Carrie, come home quick. It's Maddie. You have to come home, please." And I said, "What's happened?" And she said, I think Maddie was stabbed, and she was crying, sobbing, and by that time we were half dressed and running out the door, and the phone disconnected, and I called her back, and an EMT answered and said, "Where are you, Carrie?" And I said, "We're driving. What's wrong with Maddie? Where are you taking her?" And the EMT said, "Why don't you just pull over and we'll have somebody come get you." By that time we were on the road, and I hung up, and the other Hannah was calling me, and she was telling that I come home, and I said, "I'm on my way. Where are they taking her?" And then another EMT got on the phone and said, "Where are you? We'll come get you." And I hung up on them, and by that time we'd gotten stopped because we were speeding. And the police officer that stopped us, another officer was coming up behind him, and Jason Finch, he'd get home, and he said, "We know who you are. We'll take you there." So they escorted us all the way. The whole time I'm calling the Hannah's back, and I'm begging them, "Tell me what's wrong." And I'm asking them, and the EMTs that are getting up, I'm asking them to tell me where they're taking her, because we were already in Burlington. If they were taking her to Burlington, we were at the hospital, and they were taking her to Macomb, and we would drive straight to Macomb instead of going to our house. But there's a back way turnoff from my house, so we're going so fast, probably 10 minutes into the drive, I dropped the phone. It fell out of my hand. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, they're not taking her anywhere." And all I could think was, what possible procedure could the heart EMT be doing on her that's taking this long that they haven't loaded her up and taken her to a hospital? It dawned on me. And so I screamed. He had turned the corner by then. When the phone fell out of my hands, I said, "They're not taking her anywhere. God." And he screamed, "No, don't say that." And we were both just crying and screaming and driving so fast, and it was icy, and there was snow on the ground. And our car was about out of gas. And he drove up to the house, and I don't know if he just got out or if the car ran out of gas or what, but both our doors were open. He pulled up into the yard, and we just both ran as fast as we could to the garage. There were police cars everywhere, and there was an ambulance, and we ran up the driveway, And I was trying to get to her. I could see her covered in a quilt. All I could see was her foot sticking out from under the quilt. And I tried to get to her, and one of the EMTs, a long-time friend, told me, and I hit him, and I tried to get to her, and I fell. And I just wanted to hold her, and he kept saying, I can't let you do that, Carrie. And I saw Jason. There were a couple state police and EMT folks here. He was on the other side of a vehicle that was Maddie's vehicle, person was in. And all I could see was her foot sticking out from underneath the blanket. I just wanted to hold her. They talked us into getting into one of our friends' cars. And we're in the back seat. We had to go tell Josie. So I've been trying to get a hold of her. And I didn't see anybody else. And that night at my house, all I saw was the police cars and her in the garage on the floor. And we had to go tell Josie, which I don't know if I can talk about that part yet. Josie's her sister. Okay, and I don't know if, truthfully, if that's exactly how things went when you think about having to testify in court. And I think about those kids having to recall what happened that night, not just to Maddie and not just to us, but I think about what those kids had to see that night, and it literally makes me sick to my stomach to think about. And to think that it was, I didn't see any of them here that night. I only saw, and I remember only what I just said. And it may not have happened like that, because it's like when something so traumatic happens, your brain just, I guess, protects you from knowing exactly what's happening. So, everybody else may have seen it differently, and even Jason's recollection, which I still don't know yet, because he's never talked about it. And I've never talked about it to Josie. But we had to go get Josie. She was at a friend's house. When we got there, her friend had just let her know that we were coming, I think, and she had just woken up maybe and was getting dressed when I walked in. And Jason was behind me, and I remember walking through the door and seeing her and saying, Josie, something bad is Maddie's shot. I don't know how I knew that. Maybe I didn't say that word. I don't know. I just said Maddie's gone, I think. And I was hugging her, and she pushed me away and said, No, let's go get her. That's not true, Mom. That's not real. And I said, it is, Josie, it is. And she said, no, I want to go. I need to see her. So we drove. We weren't even thinking why did I do that? I don't know. We drove her back. A friend of ours, I think, drove us back and put us in the ambulance in front of the house. And Josie ran to Maddie. And he was stopped, of course, by the EMTs and the police. And I think, I saw her throw a couple punches and get knocked down. I just remember her saying, that's my sister. I remember Josie was so afraid because Maddie was cold, laying on the garage floor. I remember saying, she's cold, let me lay by her. And Jason put her, Josie in the ambulance, and the three of us sat there. The EMT was trying to be so nice and asked Josie if she wanted some water. And for the first time in 20 years I heard my daughter cry because Dad she was mad. And she couldn't think about drinking water. She was very rude, and if you've ever known Josie, knows she's never rude to anybody. And she tried to get out again. She whipped the door open and ran as fast as she could. She ran after her. Anyhow, it was in the snow, and she kept trying to get away from it. She's really strong. She's athlete. He ended up throwing her down in the snow. I can't imagine what that felt like for him, trying to get Josie to stop going to her sister. And we eventually got her back in the ambulance, and she punched the ambulance door. And, but my mom and dad had bought a house down here in the Harp just so they could be by my girls and see their events and be with them and stuff. So we went to that house, and that's where we stayed for a couple of weeks. So that's what I remember of that night.
Was Josie close with Maddie?
No, actually, this is also something. Well, and then, with Jason's dream, I know that he feels guilty because I think he thinks we should have gone home at 10:30 that night when he had the dream in the hotel. But I don't know what all that was for sure. How do you know? But this is another thing about her and Josie and Maddie. They were polar opposites. Maddie did everything she could to be not like Josie. Josie was valedictorian, straight A. She got a basketball scholarship. She was 5'3". She got a basketball scholarship to college. And Maddie would have been more athletic, and Maddie was just naturally just smarter than Josie. Josie just has a heart as big as you could imagine and just worked her butt off. Maddie was there for the party. She was there for the good time. I think she purposely got a B in PE because she just did not want to be a straight A student. She did not want to be a joke in any way. So they fought. There was the summer of 2016, Jason sat them both down and finally said that's it. You guys are sisters, your family. Yelled at Maddie for making bad decisions, and it was really the time when he stepped up and, told the girls that we were a family. It was the four of us, and they were going to change. And they started to get along. That summer before Maddie went to college, I heard laughing upstairs, and I didn't hear anybody come in the door, and I thought, when did Hannah get here? And I came upstairs, and it was laughing in Maddie's room, and it was Maddie and Josie, and they were in her bed, and Maddie was doing Josie's hair. And I'm pretty sure that's the first time I'd ever seen that voluntarily since they were probably 2 and 3 years old. They did not get along at all until those last couple weeks. Josie was in her room a lot on the weekends, when they would come home from college, and they would watch movies late, and I didn't know anything about that until after Maddie was gone. Josie told me that they've been texting and calling each other. So that gives my heart some peace because they didn't get along for so many years and were so opposite. And then right before Maddie was killed, they were beginning to be really good friends.
And I know, as somebody that's got 2 kids, they seem to be sometimes like the bitterest of enemies until something happens to one of them, and then they rally around them, and you see that they realize that they are, siblings, and they take each other's backs. So it sounds like it really.
There were many. Josie would come home from school, and she is shy. She's just quiet and shy. Maddie's real outgoing. And there were many times when Maddie would come home from school and Josie would already be in her room or not home from practice yet. Maddie would just be furious on a rant. She was going to beat somebody up. She's going to beat somebody up for Josie. And the other way around, too. Josie was not so much, in her own way, she'd say, Mom, I think I'm going to talk to so-and-so because they were mean to Maddie. But, they were always had each other's backs, but yes, bitter empties at home. The fighting and disagreements, the picking at each other, and as they got older, I could see in the hallway them pushing each other. Silly. But I talk to Josie now, and Josie tells me that she knows that Maddie loved her, and she knows that Maddie knew how much Josie loved her. So hearing that from Josie makes me.
Yeah. And that's what's important is that they both knew it.
Yeah, I believe they both knew it.
Yeah. And unlike many of the cases, I cover a lot of cases where 10, 20, 30 years later, people are still wondering who took their loved one from them. This is a case where who did it, and it went to court, and this person took a plea deal. He got, 20 years?
The plea agreement was actually 17.
Okay.
Judge Kavanaugh imposed the other 3 because he said that he could not, in good conscience, let him spend less time in prison than Maddie was left.
I guess plea deals have mixed blessings. On one hand, that the person is going to be punished, but on the other hand, the punishment is lighter than what it would be if he was found guilty at trial. And as you just said, here's a person that's going to spend barely any more time in prison than your daughter was alive. How tough was that to sort of accept that kind of sentence?
There's a whole other thing with the plea deal that I'd like to talk about, but one thing that I want to touch on that, I can't imagine being the parent of a murdered child where you don't know who did it. I just, or not being able to, or not know where your child is. We always think that we're in the worst of circumstances, I guess, but as far as ours goes, I don't know how those parents go on functioning every day because I can't imagine that pain. I know people can't imagine my pain, and you really can't. But I can't imagine their pain. But we did accept the plea deal, and we did it for several reasons. Number one, nothing's going to bring our Maddie back to us. It happened, and that's a fact. So nothing that we could do or nothing that's done to him will ever compare to taking Maddie from us. So that was the first reason. The second reason was Josie agreed to it. The third reason, those kids that were here that night, they do not deserve to have to go through an interrogation on the stand by his lawyer. I just could not imagine. My husband and I are both teachers, and our lives have always been about other people's kids. And we couldn't, in good conscience, let them be questioned on the stand about what happened that night. Truly the worst night of their lives. We just couldn't have them going through that at all. So we offered that plea deal. I talked to the special prosecutor in the case, and he seemed to be confident with the 17 years, and thinking about having to put those kids on the stand. I didn't know, I still, to this day, don't know any of the evidence that they had because it didn't go to trial. As far as I'm concerned, if it were up to me, I would have gone to trial, and if I didn't have to think about the other kids that were here that night, if I didn't have to think about Jason, I would have gone to trial just so I could have heard exactly what happened that night, because for me that maybe would bring a little bit of peace. I don't know. But I still don't know the details and how it went down. As far as him, I don't like to give him a second thought. And I don't care if he spends 15, 16, 17, 18 more years in prison. He's so far down on my thoughts and my hairs that I guess I don't really even think about the amount of time he's going to spend there and whether or not he's going to get out.
Does it give you any kind of peace to know that he's not going to hurt somebody else in the meantime?
Of course. I mean, if he can, pull out a gun and shoot a completely innocent girl, he's obviously got it in him to do more harm. Yeah, I'm very thankful that he's not around, which is another reason why, we took the plea deal, because at whatever age he was, 17 or whatever, 18, I don't know, 17, if he can do that to our daughter now, yeah, who knows what he's capable of. So that part brings me happiness. Whether or not he actually gets out at 20 years, I guess I'll have to think about that then. Right now I've got enough on my plate. He's just not care.
Yeah. And I wanted to point out that it was originally one of Maddie's friends who reached out to me asking if I would cover Maddie's case on the podcast. She told me that Maddie's death changed the entire town, which has to be a testament to her character. Have you felt the community there support you, and have you felt from them that Maddie is missed there?
Oh gosh, yeah. I really have those first couple of months. Our community was amazing. The outpouring of love, and I can't even imagine there has been another family that has gotten the kind of treatment that we did. Everybody was amazing. The school that we teach at, my husband and I, the administrators and the school board just bent over backwards to make sure that Jason and I were taken care of. The amount of support through cards and letters and gifts, it's just been truly amazing. Some people come to me and say, well, I didn't know Maddie, but, and if I could even just count the number of times someone said that to me, in the ways that our story has changed people's lives, that is part of what brings me happiness now, is when I hear somebody, when somebody messages me or they'll tell me, I thought of Maddie today, or I thought of your family today. Those are priceless. I can't tell you the peace that it brings to me and the happiness and joy that it brings me that somebody's remembering Maddie that way. And, we have this thing on Facebook that a friend of mine started, and it's Maddie's Random Acts of Kindness. And people still, to this day, are doing random acts of kindness and thinking of her and taking pictures and sending. And that brings me happiness.
Well, as we close, I just want to ask you for advice. If there's someone out there listening right now that maybe is going through something similar to what you've gone through, or maybe they've lost a child to violence as you did, and they're figuring out how to move forward or how to deal with a trial or just the overall aftermath of that kind of loss, what kind of advice can you give them to maybe help them?
I'm not sure why this happens to people. I'm not sure why children are taken, especially violently. But there was a family before Maddie that had gone through this, and they lost their child to cancer, and he was in Maddie's class, and I saw how that whole thing moved everybody, and I felt myself trying to be in that mother's shoes and never could put myself there. But after that happened to Maddie, she reached out to me, and her reaching out to me, I think, made a huge difference in me. And then a couple of months ago, another little girl was not killed, but her parents actually had to pull the life support system. She had choked, and I reached out to her, and in doing that, it helped me heal just a little bit. And so I think my advice to people going through this is reach out to those people who know, and when something happens like this to somebody that you might know, reach out to them, because they're lost too. I mean, I think we're all kind of lost. And knowing that there's somebody else out there that feels the same, just helps you heal just a little bit. And we'll never be fully healed. I mean, I've come to realize that we're always damaged, us as parents, because this is not the natural order of things. You're not this child. So I think I know that we're all going to deal with this together, but something that helps is knowing that there's people out there that are going through.
Oh. Well, again, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing Maddie's story with us. I know, I can tell from your voice and what we've talked about that it's still very, very hard, and I don't know that will ever go away. But, again, just hearing you talk about Maddie makes me feel like we know her a little bit better. So I appreciate you opening up and sharing her story with us.
Thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate you getting her story out there. She'll never be forgotten, and that's my biggest fear. And so now I just hold on to her little memories, and I have a little video of her. It's actually not of her, it's of her friend, but she's laughing in the background. And it's literally less than 3 seconds long, but it's her laugh. And that's something that I'll hold on to forever. Just that little piece of audio that makes me smile. And so I appreciate you doing this, and for other parents that are out there, that have lost their child, I hope that they can find that one thing that they can hold on to, whether it be a piece of audio, a daisy, a picture, something that helps them to remember who their child was.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder in My Family. If you enjoyed this episode, please introduce a friend of the podcast and invite them to listen. As we wrap up this episode, I'd like to invite you to listen to a preview of a brand new true crime podcast that I think you'll really enjoy, called Active Shooter. Be sure to give it a listen. And before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.
The investigation into the high school massacre
Parkland High School massacre.
At least 14 dead, 50 injured.
13 people were killed today in a mass shooting that includes a suspected gunman.
Coming soon, Active Shooter, a podcast that studies the psychology, motives, and methods behind some of the most notorious active shooters in North America and beyond.
East Alameda Avenue. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium. 315 and 314.
We will discuss the whys, the hows, and most importantly, the proposed solutions. Can the proper mix of mental health services and gun access put a stop to what has now become an accepted everyday occurrence? Have we become desensitized and accepting of this new phenomenon? Join us as we break down each case and discuss the failures that led to each event and how we can identify and stop them in the future. Join us soon, and please subscribe to Active Shooter